Greetings, beloved. I'm Dr. Felicia LaBoy, lead pastor and life coach here at the historic First United Methodist Church in downtown Elgin, Illinois, with another motivational moment from the Bible. These motivational moments are designed to help us take what we hear in church on Sunday, what we may learn in Sunday school. Is there such a thing? What we may hear on the radio, podcast, online, what we may read during our private devotional time. However you get the word, we want to make that really practical so that you might live that out every day. This week, I want us to focus in on this idea about servanthood versus volunteering. Servanthood versus volunteering. I have to tell you, I think that the word volunteering does not belong in the church. And let me tell you why. You and I are called to be servants of God. And let me see if I can explain about this. The Old Testament does a really good job of this. In the Old Testament, there is a passage, you can Google it. It talks about that when a master decides to set his servant free, what can happen is if that servant has found that that master is good, then what the servant does is they can pierce their ear and wear a certain kind of earring, which signifies that that servant has willingly decided to turn themselves over to the master's use because they have decided that serving under that master is better than anything else. Beloved, even Jesus said that he came to serve and not volunteer. In Romans 6, we're told that we will serve either sin or we'll serve God. There's no place in the world, there's no place in the Bible at all where the word volunteer even appears. In this passage in Ephesians 3, Paul gives his whole pedigree about how he could boast about who he was. And what he says is, because of God's grace towards him, what he recognizes what God did for him through Jesus Christ on the cross. And because of that, out of a grateful heart, and because of all the gifts God has given him, then he serves because of the grace, the power that God has given him to do something, to preach. Beloved, when God gives us the Holy Spirit, God gives us a grace to use the spiritual gifts that he has given us so that we might serve other people. That's what it says in 1 Peter 4, verse 10. So, beloved, you and I are given gifts by the Holy Spirit to serve, not to sit. And we're given gifts not to volunteer, but we're given gifts because each of us is called to do something. In our congregation, I'm called to be the mouth. Can you tell? Volunteering says, I choose to do something. And I choose to do something because it's convenient, because I get some satisfaction from it. But as Jesus said over and over in the gospel stories, a servant doesn't sit down before his master's taken care of. A servant's main objective is to make sure that his master is pleased. Jesus even said that, remember the encounter in John 4 when he meets that woman at the well? And people said, have you eaten? The disciples, when they get back, they said, have you eaten? And Jesus says, my meat, my food is to do what my Father wants me to do. Basically, he was saying, my sustenance, everything about my life is centered around serving my Father. Then he says someplace else in John, I didn't come here to be served. I came to be a servant. If Jesus, our master, came to be a servant, then how might we think that we can be anything other than that? You and I are called, no matter if we're a leader or anything, we're called to serve. I love the way that Rick Warren puts it. He says, we've been saved not to sit, but to serve. Now, some of you always say, I did my time. I've said this before. The only way you know your time is over is that you are in a box in front of a pastor or somebody, and your time is over because you are on your way home. And do you know the words that we promise that we tell you that you want to hear? Well done, thou good and faithful volunteer. No, 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 no. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Beloved, I don't know about you, but when I stand to face the Father, that's what I want to hear. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. We serve the good news out of gratefulness for what God has done, and because of God's grace, and because God gives us the Holy Spirit to, maybe not to preach, maybe it's to cook, maybe it's to pray, maybe it's to encourage, maybe it's to greet at the door, maybe it's to offer hospitality, maybe it's to knit. We have ladies in our church who make wonderful prayer shawls. We have ladies in our church that cook for funerals. We have people who greet at the door. That ministry is just as important as everything that I do. We have people who play at the piano, who sing. God gives us the grace to serve. This week, I invite you to sit with the Holy Spirit and examine your intention with regard to how you render. That's what we would say at my granny's church. How you render your service, or you volunteer. When you think about what you do for God, is it service or volunteering? And I invite you to take some time and work that out with God. I pray that you'll stick around for this week's Refresh Your Soul moment. It's one of my favorite songs, but it's entitled I Give Myself Away. It's by William McDowell, and the key note in that song says, all my dreams, all my plans, I place them in your hands, because that's what a servant does too. A servant says, here I am, everything. You choose, God, what you would have from me. And I promise you, beloved, if you do that, watch how God works, and see if God will do things that will utterly amaze you when you become God's servant. Be blessed. I love you, and I'll see you here next week.